Hello out there. We're on the air. Believe it or not, this is the second interview we've ever done on the Daily Bitcoin Journey. It's going to be a little bit of a surprise for people. I didn't tell anybody that you were coming on today, Robin.
Nice.
But we'll cut right to the point. We got a nice interview in store for today. So we got Robin all the way from Austria, right?
Yeah, Austria. It's the home of Austrian economics, even though it's not lived anymore in Austria.
A Bitcoin expert in a lot of ways, I would say. I was preparing for the show and I wrote down a whole bunch of questions for today. And I didn't even use AI. And as soon as I finished the questions, I was like, why didn't I get AI to help me with this? I've been using AI quite a bit with my channel and stuff. I guess with that, like, what are your thoughts on AI? Have you been using it at all in your channel?
I have, for the people that don't know me, I have a YouTube channel and I do a daily podcast interview. And this show wouldn't have been possible in the same quality and quantity without AI. Like it's simply, for those who know my show, everything I do, it would not be possible in the same quantity without AI. I probably would have to scale down to 3 to 4 podcast episodes a week with the same quality. So when you think about that, just like 2 years ago, I could do like 3 to 4, like still having remote podcasts, still having the other technologies outside of the ChatGPTs and the other AI tools with that. If I extract those out, I could only do half of my productivity because it's so nice. For example, you just mentioned it, researching about guests. I have customized GPT where I just put in my name, and I just put in my name and some transcripts of YouTube videos that I researched before. The research part before takes me like, I don't know, 3 minutes, because how long do you need to type in a name in YouTube and copy the transcript of that video and other interviews he has done, and then put the text in ChatGPT. And then I get a perfectly aligned paper for me where it's like, okay, what are the 10 most controversial topics that he usually talks about? What are the 10 biggest questions he usually gets? What are questions that he should get, but he doesn't get in interviews? Like just like an outline of those, and just reading that. Like I don't take the question from AI and ask the guest, but just reading those outlines of AI gives me an idea what the guest is all about, and this helps me out a lot. And I needed around 2 hours per guest in the beginning to prepare, because it's important for me to know the guest.
Yes.
Now I'm taking like 10 to 20 minutes.
That's crazy.
And so that's my use of AI just in the preparation. Then obviously AI cuts out big pauses, because sometimes I ask a question and the guest is like, oh, let me think about that. Yeah. And he makes like a 5, 6, 7 second pause. And I know when I listen to a podcast and there's a long pause, I check my phone if the podcast is still running. So I want to cut out the really long pauses. AI does that automatically, and like with a 99% rate. Like there's rarely something going wrong with that, and I try to like quality control that a little bit with some tools. And then like I also do a trailer in front of the show. So like there's like 5 to 10 snippets of the podcast as a highlight, edited together, like with animations and everything like that, to tell a story what the podcast is all about. And that takes me the longest time. Without that, I could probably do like 2 per day. And this trailer is really nice, because the snippets is found by AI way easier. And then AI gives me like 40 or 50 snippets, and I look through them and then choose like the 5, 10 best of them. So there are probably like 5, 6 more tools that I could list. But yeah, I use AI a lot in my podcast, and it wouldn't even be possible in the current form without AI.
No, that's awesome, man. I'm just kind of getting to know it a little bit myself. I don't obviously do it in the same magnitude as you, but it's been very helpful for me too. I mean, even just an example that I used the other day, it was like I was looking at Dogecoin and I knew that I didn't know enough about it to talk about on the show. So I just kind of said, like, give me some background about Doge. It led me to about 5 or 6 different questions. Like it almost was prompting me on to ask it more questions. And so then it kind of summarized it all in a nice document, a nice format for me to talk about in order logically. And, you know, 5 years ago, I would have had to either take 5 hours to do that with Google, or I would have had to pay someone to do that for me. And this was done in 2 minutes.
And it will have such important influence on how we work in the future, and also like how we can benefit from that. It's the same with Google. It's the same with every technology revolution. Those who can embrace and empower that will benefit massively. Like I really love the quote of AI doesn't replace you. A human with AI will replace you, and
That's absolutely right.
That's so true with that, and it will make a major impact. And also, as you said, and I think there will be people that replace their brain with ChatGPT, and that's probably a mistake. Like, you still have to critical think. Just because ChatGPT gives you something, don't just believe it. Like, ChatGPT is just a model, and it can make a lot of mistakes and can make a lot of false assumptions. You really have to challenge yourself and challenge the tool. So if you really know what the tool is doing and you really know how to use it, you can benefit massively, but also you can get burned. Like, if you use ChatGPT and you just like blindly trust it, like there's also like a lot of like you have to be on a higher level and almost treat it as an employee who does great work, but you still are the boss. You still have to be the last line of defense, what actually is working, what actually is not working. So trust it only to the extent you can trust it, and for that you actually have to research how those technologies works.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's very similar to an employee, almost like having a conversation. It's not like Google where you're just typing in questions and stuff. Like, it's an actual conversation. But anyways, for people watching today, what would you tell somebody who's just starting to get into AI, wants to learn a little bit more about it? Like, what would you give them for advice in terms of tools or resources to start with? Just at a very basic level.
I think the most important thing is just play with it in the first innings. Like, take out like 3-4 hours on a weekend and open ChatGPT. Open for maybe if you have X Premium, you can also use Grok. They're like also Gemini of Google. Just use the different ones and just go in there and talk with it, interact with it in the first like hour, and then when you familiar with like how it answers and how it does, like think of like a task maybe that you do every day, and see what task of my everyday life, what I work every day, could I maybe outsource actually to ChatGPT, or maybe like from the task a small previous task, or how could it help me be a little bit more prepared, be a little bit more, how should I say it, a little bit faster with one task. It doesn't have to replace you. It doesn't have to replace a whole task. It can maybe just assist you in a way. Like, I think the comparison with an employee is actually really good, because what do I do with an employee? Figure out what he is good in and figure out how he can help you in the everyday life, and maybe he can even replace a whole task. You still have to do the quality control, you still have to be there, but if you never talk to him, you don't even know what he's capable of. And so talk to those AI tools and really figure out, okay, how could it help you? And just go in there with an open mind, go in there with like the playful mind, even in the beginning especially. And then once you are comfortable with it, as I said, you can go in there with like an CEO mind, or with like an entrepreneurial mind. Okay, how could I use ChatGPT to improve my life right now? How could I do that? Or like other tools, there's so many tools that you can use, but most AI tools just is like an API call to OpenAI. So it's in most cases actually better to use ChatGPT. For example, I used one tool to find me the snippets of the trailer. This was Opus clips. I don't do clips, so I don't use the clips. I just need to find the clips, and I paid like $400 per year for that clip, for that tool. And then I was like, maybe ChatGPT can also do it. And I just put the transcript in ChatGPT. It found me the clips. It was even better because then I could improve it over time and really customize it to myself. And now I save $400 a year on that subscription. So most things you can actually do with like ChatGPT or something like that. Yeah, that's basically how I would start doing that. I'm not an AI expert. I'm just like an AI user, I would say. I'm a heavy user actually. If you take ChatGPT away from me, I will struggle a lot. Like if that tool is down, and it was down like I think half a year ago for 2 hours, and I just I went to lunch. I was like, I will take now a lunch break and we'll come back if ChatGPT is coming back.
Yeah, it is. It's easy to get hooked on. I think you mentioned ChatGPT, Grok. I use Claude a lot for myself and Venice AI. So I think you said it, you have to be playful with it. I think that's the best advice, is just play around with it. Just see what it can do, have some conversations with it, try out a few different ones. And yeah, that's the crazy thing about, where we are right now within AI, within Bitcoin, is that it's evolving so fast. There's always new options. Like you said, you paid $400 and then you realize that something else could do it. So not only do you have to be aware of everything, but you have to keep being aware of everything. And that's within Bitcoin too. It's kind of wild. And I think that both of us, we do daily Bitcoin shows. And I think we have a lot of material and content for many years ahead, just for that simple reason of it. Technology never really ends.
100%. I mean, I think that Bitcoin, the protocol itself, will be boring at some point, just as TCP/IP protocol is not right now boring. But there might be applications on top of Bitcoin that is interesting. And just as like now we're talking about ChatGPT, which still is working when you're interacting with it on a base layer on TCP/IP protocol. So we're still using that one protocol that was really exciting a few years, or maybe even like already decades ago. But maybe Bitcoin is the same way, where right now it's really exciting. It's getting adopted. We have the monetary side of it where it's getting adopted. We even have like some interesting use cases on top of Bitcoin, especially with payments, that is getting adopted. But we are super early. If you think we are not early in Bitcoin, just go out on the street and ask like 50 people what is Bitcoin and what you can do with it and what the current price is and what the block height is and some really basic things. Then you get a grasp on how early we are. Sometimes with this internet bubbles, we forget that we are actually really early, and those 100,000 or 200,000 Bitcoiners that talk to each other online all the time is actually a really small minority compared to like those 8 billion people who still don't get it. So yeah, I think Bitcoin will be super exciting, and my podcast will be probably Bitcoin focused for the next 5 to 10 years. After that, maybe it will take a turn for other topics. Maybe it will take a turn in completely different ventures. Maybe I'll talk about diet. I don't know. Who knows what in 10 years will be interesting for myself. That's why I also actually branded my podcast Robin Sire and not like Bitcoin anything, because I want to do it all my life. And Bitcoin, I think, will become boring at some point if everyone uses it. So that's the thing behind it.
That's smart. You're thinking ahead. Well, I know we kind of jumped into things here rather quickly off the start, but a couple different things here. So we got the live chat. I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat today. I see there's, I'm not going to go through them all. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time today, but There's a lot of great comments in there so far. If you do have any questions, can you see the chat, Robin?
I can see the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Where
if you see a
the
comment that jumps out to you, just feel free to, stop what we're doing and answer that. So if you have any questions for Robin, if you have anything you want to discuss, then just throw it in the chat. And I do see that Zapstream's humming over there as well. So it's good. We got some people on YouTube. We got some people on Zapstream. And so, Robin, you talked about, how early we are here and talking to people on the street about Bitcoin. In Austria, what's the vibe there for Bitcoin?
I just posted yesterday around that because a famous Austrian Bitcoin podcast, he does it in German, so probably not a lot of people here know him. He's Nico Jelchen. He posted like, why don't we have a Bitcoin reserve in Austria? Austria is the home of Austrian economics. That's where it originated from. And it's like now El Salvador is kind of the home of Austrian economics, or other countries, even like America is slowly moving in that direction. And Austria is still, we had elections 2 months ago, I think, the general elections on a national level were, and Bitcoin was not a topic. Digital asset was not a topic. Crypto was nothing like that was even a topic. We had a topic inflation, like inflation was a big topic because we have one of the highest inflation rates in Europe.
Really?
So inflation is actually a topic in Austria. But we talked on inflation, like, oh yeah, it's the Ukraine war, it's the energy costs, it's this and that. And I was like, really? It's like, because there's war there, we have now a higher in inflation. We always have war somewhere. Why was it not a problem like before? So they're not focused on like the cause of inflation. They're more focused on like, it's there because some other things, so they put the problem somewhere else. With that being said, the Bitcoin community, especially in the German-speaking community, is really strong. I'm in a lot of Bitcoin communities around the world because I speak English with everyone, so I know the Indians, Africans, Americans, Canadians, and stuff like that. So Americans are really strong. Obviously, Americans are a big community in Bitcoin. I have over 50% of my community actually in America. But for the size of the German-speaking community, they are super strong. For example, Roman Reha, the block trainer in the German-speaking area, he has probably the biggest channel in the German-speaking. He has the biggest channel in the German-speaking area on YouTube, and he has 200,000 subscribers. He only does German, so and he only talks about Bitcoin and really on a technical level even. So that speaks to the volume of like how many Bitcoiners are there in the German-speaking area. And I was in El Salvador, and it was like half the people are German there. It was crazy. There was even a German delegation. They came in a group of 40 there. So the German-speaking community in general is really strong. But at the same time, the political level, the level above that, they are completely ignorant to that. There are a few that get it. There's in German parliament, Joanna Kotar. She's a really Bitcoiner. She's on Bitcoin conferences. She's really good. Then on the Austrian level, on the national level, there's like 2-3 that are good on it, but they are not on Bitcoin conferences and stuff like that, like Joanna is in Germany. So they're not doing that good. It's just not a topic on the political level. But grassroots movement is also, I think, full nodes. I think Germany is actually leading, or like number 2 or 3 in the whole world of like how many full nodes there are. So the community is really strong. Grassroots movements. There's also like every month a meetup. Sometimes there are 30, 40, 50 people. It's really strong of a community, and I like the German community. But yeah, that's basically sums it up. A lot of grassroots movement, a lot of people running full nodes, being aware of CBDCs, and doing the hard work. The German engineers coming out in Bitcoin, they're really nerding out in the conferences and meetups around self-custody and how you can do it everything yourself and assemble also the parts yourself. So this I'm really proud in that way to be in the German-speaking community, even though I do everything in English. But at the same time, you look at the government and you're like, oh, they are selling 50,000 Bitcoin. They are making the biggest mistakes ever.
Oh man, that's going to be one of the worst things in history, eh? That's a tough one. That's tough.
It's already such a big mistake. 50,000 Bitcoin, and they sold at like $60,000, $55,000. Calculate how much money they would have made if they would have sold 50,000 Bitcoin, not at 60,000, but at 93, 94, whatever we are right now. That's a huge, huge mistake. How much kindergarten they could have paid with that money, how much more facilities, streets and stuff like that they could have made just with that small change. Maybe they could have like postponed the decision, maybe had some democratic things in there, say like, okay, we have those Bitcoin, let's think about if we should sell it or how to do it. They could easily postpone the selling of the Bitcoin like a year or something like that. And the interesting thing, when they sold it, it was sold as a success story. They got now a Bitcoin from those evil people, and now we sold it. Now we cashed in on that, and now we can now we can do with the Bitcoin more in the public scene. And I'm like, really? Was it a success story? Just 3 months afterwards, we know you're wrong, and it's not a success story.
I mean, that's just I feel like we've had 16 years of negative media, negative press, negative marketing against that. And that's what I was going to ask you as kind of the next question here. Like, what do Austrians and what do people in that area think about America and Trump? Like, is it something where, you know, people are afraid to talk about it, afraid to bring it up, afraid to admit they like Trump? Or is it more like, you know, they see through the BS?
You have to differentiate here between Bitcoiners and non-Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
In the Bitcoin scene, obviously there are some that really love Trump and like Trump, what he's doing. There's some also that say they are okay with Trump, they're kind of neutral to Trump, but they really like that he's doing something with Bitcoin. But they also think there are also people that think like he's stupid and he doesn't know what he's doing, but he surrounds himself with good people. So that's like the 3 cohorts of Bitcoiners in Austria and Germany. But the biggest ones are those who really like Trump or are neutral to Trump. The cohorts that really doesn't like him is very small. But then it shifts a lot if you go to non-Bitcoiners. And also, especially when you turn on the mainstream media, first of all, they were shocked that he won. they were so shocked that he won that I'm like, did they never visited Twitter? Did they never visited any real news?
Yeah, drive through a city in America and tell me that was an upset.
Yeah,
it's like I've been in America. You know, I live in Canada, so I go down to the US once in a while. But every time I drive through a city there, and I like driving too, I don't like flying. So I mean, you'll see trucks with Trump, yard signs with Trump, huge flags with Trump, huge American flags right beside a Trump one. And for the last 4 years, even with Biden as president, I think I saw one sticker on a car from like a Pontiac Sunfire, some idiot driving the car with a Biden sticker. It's like, just use your eyes, use your brain. And I know they try to manipulate everything, including the information. But yeah, if you're paying attention at all, it wasn't an upset at all.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was very hard for me because I saw polling markets very clear. It was like Trump is leading, Trump is leading, Trump is leading. But then there are also the official polls that say like, oh yeah, Trump could win, but it's a close race. And then you see the mainstream media in Europe, and you're like, oh yeah, like it might actually happen that Trump wins, but we don't know. It could be a close race. And then also people say like, when do we expect a result? No, it will take days till we get an actual result because it might be very close. And then we just got a result at like 11 p.m., 12 p.m. in America. And I think it was a.m. in the next morning for Austrians in the morning. So that was very clear, and I love that Polymarket was so clear on it. Polymarket was the kind of site that I looked at, because it was like the actual people with actual money bet on it, so they have a higher incentive. As the polls is like you can highly directionalize what a poll is saying with like which people are you interviewing and what metrics are you actually using. So polls is like never trust the statistics that you didn't falsify yourself. And with that, Polymarket was for me, that's probably more correct in the end. And we saw it. Like the poll said it's a closer race. Polymarket said he will win all 7 swing states. Guess who was right in the end? He actually won all 7 swing states. And for that, people were really shocked. But mainstream media is even shocked. For example, RFK. It was so clear that RFK is a big part of Donald Trump administration. He will be health secretary. How is that called in America? Health secretary.
Something like Department of Health. I don't know.
And it was a shock a few days ago when he publicly announced that in Austria. People are like, oh, he appointed now this guy to the health department. And I was like, he ran on that platform. Like it was weeks before the election clear that RFK will be the health department and health administration of Donald Trump. And now the European media is like, oh, see, now he's elected and he now appoints him for the health sector. So it's really interesting how this media machine is working. And I really like to go to the main source, going to the first primary source of things. Like if the media says like, oh, Trump said that, why not just go there to the interview which Trump actually gave and what he actually said and see the context, or go to the tweet he actually tweeted. And this is where I think we have to go as Bitcoiners, critical thinking, and go to the most primal and most first source that we can go to. And Twitter is a great place for that, because a lot of news are originating from that. And yeah, then just like see the actual video, because a lot of news break from like podcasts or from tweets or from interviews he does. So you can actually look at what he actually said and what the context before and after that is, and if it's wrongfully, stuff like that. So this is really important.
Yeah, it's a big part about Bitcoin. The one thing I learned very on in Bitcoin is that most Bitcoiners are able to see through things, mostly because of the don't trust, verify mentality that's built inside of Bitcoin. And I think that not only do you have to read the actual quotes and what they said, but I think you have to take it a step further and actually watch the whole, like the mainstream media here will do a very good job of taking 2 hours of Trump talking and finding 10 seconds of something that he might have said that might be controversial and only focusing on that 10 seconds. Whereas if you watch the whole 2 hours of it, you would think completely different of him, what he was talking about. I know he says a lot of, outlandish things and talks about nothing for about half it, but it's still very important to actually hear people talk and hear what context is being used in. And I feel like that's why Bitcoiners are so far ahead of everybody, because they do that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a huge thing for us Bitcoiners. Don't trust, verify. It's such a huge mentality shift. If you think about the Bitcoiner biggest memes, it's like HODL, which basically means save, don't spend on stupid stuff. Then it's like don't trust, verify, which just means turn your brain on. Don't just believe everything you're told. Also not from other Bitcoiners, because also Bitcoiners are saying stupid things. So just like don't trust, verify things for yourself. And all those really big memes in Bitcoin have a massively positive message behind them, and I really like being here and being in that. Also, like that's the one I forgot. Stack sats and stay humble. I really like that also one. Like stay humble, stay kind. And this is this is really important and could really change the world if we not only succeed in getting the world better money, but also succeed in implementing those memes, those mindset milestones into society. Could really be a great way of looking at the world in the future.
I couldn't agree more with that. And that's one thing I say on my channel all the time is like, I know people are here for the price, for the Bitcoin stuff, but more than anything else, my channel talks about logic. And I feel like that's what Bitcoin is. It's just logic, like it's common sense. This isn't outlandish claims that people should be thinking about the future with a low time preference, that people should be kind to each other and humble, and it's just logic. We've gone so far away from logic that people see it as outlandish now, but all it is just common sense. So it looks like I see Jason here said Thunderstruck, which means that we hit $95,000 on the show here, which is good news for Bitcoiners, or bad news if you're trying to get more Bitcoin. But let's talk about your show, Robin, because you've been doing some very impressive work. I like your mission that you try to interview a Bitcoiner every single day for a year. Let's maybe start with the big dog, because I noticed you had a nice chat with Sailor in person.
Oh yeah.
What was Sailor like?
That's funny because people assume I have like outside of the actual interview, like a pre-talk and like a talk after that. Was absolutely not the case.
Really?
No, like I can tell you the whole story how it came to be. It's quite short actually. Yep. I made like a year before the podcast, like the podcast is what now, 4 or 5 months ago. A year before that, he started reposting the AI pictures that I did on YouTube. On Twitter, I posted some AI pictures with like Bitcoin quotes that was like, felt fancy. It was like AI pictures were a big thing, and Bitcoin quotes, just put it together. It was really easy to do. And people really seemed to like it in the beginning. I don't do it now because it feels like not that interesting anymore. But back then, Sailor actually took my AI pictures and actually tagged me in them. And it was nice because every time he posted that, I got like 500 new followers.
Wow.
So that was like an influx just because he tagged me. So this was the first kind of contact with him, even though we never talked. Mm-hmm. And then a year later, like 2 weeks before we actually recorded the podcast, or 3 weeks before that, he followed my Twitter channel. He followed me on Twitter, and that I was like, oh, I have to use that opportunity now. That's now or never. And like 20 minutes after he followed me, I directly made a public tweet of like, hey, thank you for following me. So you're a huge inspiration. You were the main reason why I dropped all my stocks for Bitcoin in 2020. It would be an honor to host you on my podcast, something like that. It's public, so everyone can look it up, about something along those lines I wrote. And he was like, writing back, what did he write back? He wrote back, I think, absolutely, I always like to talk about Bitcoin, something along this line. It was just like a short sentence. And he DM'd me then a contact of his assistant that I should contact. And that's it. That's all the communication I had before the podcast. All the organization stuff I did with the assistant, not with him, obviously. And then when he came to the location where we filmed, half an hour early comes the assistant and checks everything out, if everything is perfect for him. And then half an hour later, he comes and he just sits down and tells me and asks me, oh, how long are we going and how many questions do you have? And then I explained it to him, and then we just press record and talked. So how Michael Saylor is, for me, it's just maybe also an interesting insight. He is extremely focused, not a small talker. He's not coming in and saying like, "Oh, hi, Robin, how you doing?" He's like, "Oh, hello, and directly to the couch, sit down, press record, let's do the podcast. And he's really straightforward but really a kind person. Afterwards, he said like, "Oh, thank you for setting everything up," and then he just left. Yeah, so like we literally exchanged outside of the podcast maybe 4 sentences. So I don't have any insight other what I got from the podcast that everyone can anyways look at.
That's kind of wild. I mean, I know people in my own life that I've come across. They're very few, like the very few people when I used to work in accounting world. There was one partner who was the exact same, just absolutely no bullshit at all. What's the point? Not even like a hey, hello. Like, okay, my time is very scarce here. Cut to the point. And, you know, I respect that. That's definitely not my style of doing, but I'm also not Michael Saylor's shoes. So I think that that's very interesting. And I kind of got that vibe from him when I was watching his his talk in Cantor Crypto last week, when he was giving his presentation and his clicker stopped working, and he was getting very frustrated with the person who had to take over the slides for him. Just like no messing around here. We got to get this finished. We got to stay on time. That's a very small percentage of people, but I think in order to get to his level of where he is, I think you have to be like that.
And you have to think about how many responsibilities he has, and what level he's operating on, and what his 1 hour is worth.
Yes.
So that's why I also did then the podcast actually in the Treasure headquarters. We had 4 people operating the cameras and the microphones behind the scenes. And I was just wanting to make sure everything is perfect when he comes here and there's nothing going wrong, because that's like one shot. And if I mess up, I don't get him again. Because you have to think, like, I was a small podcast. I'm still not a huge podcast. I have like around 12,000 subscribers now, which means on YouTube around 50,000, 70,000 people watch me on a monthly basis. It's huge for me, but there are way bigger channels that he can go on that have millions of subscribers and tens of millions of audience members every month. So for him to go with his time and his value to go on a small podcast that has 2,000 subscribers, I had when he actually accepted the invitation on YouTube, that's huge. That was like, wow. Like, first of all, like, why he did select me, because there are a lot of podcasts that were bigger than mine he wasn't on, and I know they also want him on and they invited him, and for some reason he didn't react to him. So I would be really curious, first of all, like how he selects where he goes, because he has a selection progress. He's not just like going to any podcast. He knows of like what he is doing. And also an insight that I thought about only after recording it with him. Actually, Nico, that I talked before, the German, the Austrian guy, the podcast that I talked before about, he told me this. He's not coming onto your show if he didn't saw at least like 2 or 3 episodes. He will not do that.
Really?
If he doesn't know your style. He doesn't know your episodes, because he doesn't want to invest the time of him being there when he didn't at least watch some of the stuff. This makes, for me at least, total sense. I didn't ask him, but Nico told me this, that you can be very certain that he watched some of your episodes, or at least one episode, that he knows who you are and how you do the episodes.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big compliment then. The one thing I was going to ask you on that is how is the build up for that? How is the prep for that? Were you, when you walked into the room and you sat down, like, were you shitting your pants, or were you fairly under control?
I was absolutely shitting my pants.
I don't blame you.
Everyone tells me that it was really great, and it was I looked very relaxed, and after watching it I was like, oh yeah, I'm actually way more relaxed than I actually was.
Than you felt,
like,
yeah.
from my standpoint, I mean, most of the time I just listened and didn't talk, but so it was easier with that. But man, my heart rate, it would be really interesting to see if I had like a heart rate monitor on and blood pressure monitor on while doing that, because I think all the levels were like completely elevated. I was never that alert on any interview or I was recently the first time ever on stage at Bitcoin Amsterdam on the main stage with like 20,000 live stream people and 2,000 in person, which is huge for me. But I was not even close to that nervous when I had Michael Saylor on before that. That was my heart was just racing all over, but in the end it worked perfectly fine. But I was super nervous. You couldn't even believe. I spent hours on hours and hours on trying to figure out the best 3-4 questions, because you don't get more questions anyways, to ask. And then right before, like at Bitcoin Prague, I recorded with him, and in the beginning, in the morning, he had a presentation at Bitcoin Prague, and in the afternoon, I had the podcast with him. So I saw his presentation, and when I saw the presentation, I threw out all the preparation I did till this point, and I went basically to the quietest place and smallest place in Bitcoin Prague, and just sat there like under a staircase basically, and was like writing new questions down, because I wanted to relate that podcast to the talk he gave, and did that for I think an hour around that time. And this was then my actual preparation. And in the podcast, I actually just used 2 of the questions that I prepared for, and everything else was spontaneous that I was curious about. And that's I think the best podcast, where you just throw out your questions and you go on the tangents where the guest just kind of leads you towards, because the guest is always like answering your questions, but he leaves cues in his answers of might be interesting to go down a rabbit hole. So if you really closely listen to someone, you actually just need to prepare 1 question for good guests. Like if the guest is just like giving you like two sentences as answers, there are not a lot of cues in there. But once you have like longer answers and more tangents to go there, you can actually go down a really nice rabbit hole, even though I still prefer to prepare at least like 5 topics I can go down, because maybe the first 3 topics are not that interesting for the guest and he doesn't talk that much about it, but this rarely happens. So usually I prepare around 10 to 12 questions I want to ask, and ask 3 of them, and the rest of the podcast is just a conversation. In that way you are prepared, but also be flexible with it.
Yeah, I think that's important. That's one thing I've learned from doing, not only the channel here, but like public speaking, is it's good. You have to know it, where you don't need notes, but you need the notes just to be comfortable enough, because if the last thing you want there on stage is to freeze up and have nothing to, like, that's worst case scenario for anybody who's doing public speaking, is to just, your brain stops working and you got nothing to fall back on. You got a whole bunch of people looking at you. So I agree with you. It's good to have very much prepared, but also just kind of see where things go.
I had this the first time ever in El Salvador, because in El Salvador, first time ever I emceed. So between the presentations, there's always like a person coming on stage, and first of all doing the intro for the next speaker, but also getting time in between the speakers so everyone can prepare for it. Like behind the scenes, the next guest has to get the microphone right, and maybe the guest is late, or the previous speaker is just cutting his talk from 30 minutes to 20 minutes, which happened. So there's a lot of moving parts, and an MC is basically there to fill a gap, because there's an audience sitting and they're all looking to the stage, and they are probably going away if nobody is talking on that stage, and you want to keep them there. And usually it's really easy. You go out there, you're like, oh, that's the next one. You just talk for like 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, because you don't want to take up space in the program. But there was this one instant, the guest actually stopped 10 minutes early. The speaker stopped 10 minutes early to speak, and the other speaker just arrived, because usually it's like 20 minutes before you should arrive, but he just chose to come like 10 minutes early. So he just
time to
came.
fill.
Yeah, so he needed time to get his mic on, to get his presentation ready. And I was just walking on stage with no plan whatsoever I will speak about. And I said, who's the next speaker? And then I was looking left, and they're like, oh, are we ready already? And then the guy who keeps the technique in check, he's like, 5. And I was like, 5 minutes, go on stage with no plan whatsoever, and then go ahead and speak 5 minutes of, what do you want to speak about? But it went fine. Like I speak now so much about Bitcoin that 5 minutes is quite easy once you get in there. And the funny thing is, you have an audience. And I was like, hey, let's interact. So I was like, hey, what's going on? Has someone questions? And then I was just interacting actually with the audience and going from the stage to the crowd actually, and was interacting with the people there. And it was fine. It was definitely not great. It was definitely not awesome. I was definitely not good in that. But it went by fine. And so you just gather more experience, and you level up that way. And yeah, I love that a lot actually.
I mean, so you talked to Sailor, you've been to El Salvador, Prague, you've got a bunch of different things going on right now. Mm-hmm. Who would you say like is the most underrated or most surprising guest that you've had on that not a whole lot of people know about, or should do some further looking into, like that you've had on your show? How many people have you had on your show now, by the way? Do you have a count?
I have a count. I don't count exactly. I think 320.
Holy, 320 Bitcoiners.
Yes, around that. It's not even that easy, because sometimes I have an episode with 2 people.
Right.
And sometimes already I had like a second guest 2 times on. So I have already at least 300, but it's probably like 320, 325. And I actually have one great answer for that, the most underrated one. He just started his own podcast, and my episode with him was his first ever appearance on any podcast. And it was so surprising for me, because he never did any interview, never did any podcast, but he was really interesting. He had unique views, and he was a unique speaker, and he never did anything public speaking. And he has on Twitter, I think, like 300 followers, 400 followers, or something like that.
Yeah,
and
that's why I wanted to ask this, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there. Everybody like gravitates towards the Preston Pishes, the Sailors, all that kind of stuff. But there's a whole bunch of like really interesting Bitcoiners under the surface.
Yeah, and he's really interesting, and he just had his first ever episode out, and he will also do like kind of solo episodes, but also interviews. And I think if he is not only good in speaking and not only good in Bitcoin, but also is good in marketing, which I hope he is, he will be a big figure in Bitcoin. So I want to give him a shout out. He's Arvind Nathan. Arvind, I don't know how to pronounce it. Arvind Nathan, probably. If you Google it on Twitter, it's ARVS notes. So that's pretty cool. And he is, pretty unknown, as he has only 400 followers on Twitter, but he speaks really good, and he did a really great podcast. And there are probably 30 or 40 other examples I could bring up. There's, for example, a science teacher that came onto my podcast, and he never was in any Bitcoin related. He didn't even had a Twitter channel. He wrote in my replies how to get on my podcast, and I said to him, "Oh, write me on Twitter." And then he made a Twitter channel for that. And then he was like, "Oh, how can I do it?" And I was like, "Oh, I have to see something of you. I just want to see what you're thinking about and stuff like that." And he went ahead, opened a YouTube channel, and uploaded a video, 1 hour of him talking about Bitcoin. And
Really?
I just told you before that I also did that, and I was like, oh, I'm fucking boring. And he did the same thing, and I listened to 20 minutes, and I was like, he's super interesting. Like, he's actually interesting, and he's a teacher, so obviously he knows how to talk in front of an audience because he's a teacher. And the podcast was amazing. I think it got like 11K views on a channel with like 5K subscribers with a guest who nobody knows about. So that was a pretty huge accomplishment. So we could go on, and maybe actually that could be an interesting idea. I never had that. Maybe I do a YouTube playlist.
I was going to say that you should do that for like 2024, like a year in review, like do the most underrated shows of the year.
Yeah, the most underrated guests that have ever been on my show, and just like have a playlist that I can share, because I get that question actually quite a lot, and I usually bring up Arvind or the science teacher. So they are both really good, but I really have to dig deep, because there's probably one that really surprised me that I already forgot about because I do so many in every day. So yeah, and that's why I didn't start with that intent, but I'm really big on that now. I really want to give people like Arv and people like the science teacher a stage of presenting themselves and their own opinions and perspectives, because we all know what Michael Saylor will say. Like, more or less we know what he will say. We are just like amazed in how many different ways he can say the same thing, and how brilliant he can phrase the same exact thing. And we also know what Jeff Booth will say. We also know what Natalie Brunell, Preston Pitch, and all those amazing guys will say, and we need them, and they're important for the Bitcoin community. But the people that are unknown, the people that are like basically maybe don't even have a Twitter channel, they are not there. And I go through that, let's call it hustle, because there are also episodes that I don't release, because it's basically a little bit of a gamble of interviewing someone that has never been on a podcast before, because you don't know, can he speak? Can he speak in a podcast? That it's a skill. Like, if you have a conversation with someone outside of the podcast, doesn't mean he can do the same thing in front of a camera that is recording. Some people freeze and are so nervous that they cannot put out even one sentence that is good. So I go through that sometimes, but it's not a drama, because mostly the guest himself doesn't want to post it. It's rarely that I have to say, I think we should not post it. Maybe let's do it again in like 6 months. That's usually my approach to that. But it's so worth it. Like, getting people on and discovering them and getting their perspectives and really getting a different view and different perspective on Bitcoin is so important, because there are podcasts that just rewash all the same guests. They have like 50 guests and they do all over again, and maybe there's like 10 new guests per year or 20 new guests per year, which is good. I don't want to criticize that. This fulfills a purpose. It's obviously for something, but I don't want to do that. It's boring for me. And I have now in 11 months, I had 300 guests on. Different guests, 300
That's
different
crazy.
guests. And I want to keep doing that. So I get now approached from guests that has already been on and saying like, hey, I want to be a second time on. And I'm always saying like, it has to be at least half a year. And in most cases, I actually want to have like a year or more than a year in between, because I don't want to rewash the same 365 guests also. I want to have every year new people on, and not rewash all the same one. Obviously, if someone was very popular and people really want him to be back on, he will be back on because he was popular. The free market decides basically. But I also want to have those slots that are always filled with new people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that, it's a big gamble, because you know that if you got the bigger guests on there, the shows are going to do well. You're going to make more income from that. And you know that your time's going to be well spent. So that's very interesting to me, because there are so many people out there, and it is such a big risk to take. But I think in the long term, like if you even think about things like the music industry, where that's where that's where real things are made, when you can discover somebody that early, and not that you're going to be getting royalties from them or anything, but I feel like the Bitcoin mentality is much different than trying to suck things from people. It's more like lifting people up.
I have a really interesting statistic. I did that because I was curious about. I have YouTube ad revenue, and I don't want to completely say everything that I make, but that's why I just keep it. So let's say the base amount that I get per episode is like an X amount, whatever that amount is. And when a guest is really good, he's 10X from that. Like I get usually like from an episode that does an average experience versus the episode that does really good is usually 10X from that. Because usually also the views are 10X from that, or maybe a little less, little more. So it doesn't mean more views, more revenue. Even on the same channel, it's not true like that. You probably know that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some videos with 20,000 views that do more revenue than a 30,000 view video, which amazes me, but it is like it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really crazy statistic. That we have the normal videos, the average video that does one amount, and the 10X amount of a good video, that like number 2, 3, 4, 5 in the podcast. Sailor did 10X more revenue than the second best video on my channel.
Wow.
Just from ad revenue, 10X of that amount. Plus, then there is commission coming in from the sponsors. Then there is the whole thing of like, because I had Sailor on, the overall podcast gets a higher marketing and higher brand. So it's probably like 20X if we get the real numbers. So just for people to know, it's a way better profit model to have just like 2 podcasts per week and have only really big guests on, because it makes so much more money, and you don't have to do all the work. Because if a podcast episode flops, I get like 1/10 of that what an average episode does. Then like see an average episode 10X that, 10X that, 10X that, then we're on a Sailor level.
That's
so
wild.
Obviously it's the better model to have a Sailor on. But first of all, I don't want to do that all the time. I obviously need them actually to make a stage free for the other ones. But also what you said, I think long term, actually, it will pay off way better. I think it is a way better model of giving a bigger stage to people, because then people come to me not because of the guest, but they come because of they come because of the stage that I created for those guests, and I want to have everyone on. I would love to interview Elon Musk about Bitcoin. I would love to interview Donald Trump, Andrew Tate, everyone around Bitcoin, because it's interesting for me to find out what they're talking and find out that. But the bigger value that they actually give is their audience comes and gives an audience to the stage that also has the small people on, the undiscovered people on. And I figured that out like after 7-8 months in the podcast, that this is actually my model that I want to do. Being really bullish on the stage that I create and not being bullish on the guests that I get on.
That's a great way to look at it, honestly. That's impressive. So with all the stage, with the guests you've had on, what's your takeaways from it? Like what's the common themes? What have you learned most from all the guests, all the different perspectives? Like what's been your main takeaways from 2024 so far around Bitcoin?
That's the hardest questions I get, because I cannot get it down to one thing. If I had to get it down to one thing, it would be ownership. That's the theme around all podcast guests. It's like we're really bullish on ownership, not only in Bitcoin. Like we want to own our money, we want to own what we eat, we want to own what sports we're doing. Like we want to take ownership of our decisions and our thinking and be critical thinkers. That's kind of, I think, the common theme around that. But then actual practical learnings from that is like, we are super early in Bitcoin. I learned about that. Also weird learnings that I had from that. I didn't knew about UTXO management before I started the podcast. I should have known, but I didn't. I learned about UTXO management. I also massively bettered my own self-custody solution. I had self-custody from actually day one since I have Bitcoin. I'm really proud that I never went it on exchanges. I don't know, for some reason it just made sense on day one in 2020 to always have self-custody. But I massively improved my setup with the podcast. So I had practical learnings in there. I had like surprising learnings in there. The overall theme is ownership. But then I also learned about parenting. I think it got more traditional in that sense. Actually, my values actually changed a little bit with the podcast, because I saw how important it is to have kids, to found a family, to be committed to one person. I always phrase it like that. I had university of life with my podcast, with all those amazing Bitcoiners, and I get paid to attend that university every day. And that perspective changed around August. It's not that long ago, with like, oh shit, like I'm 26 now, and I go to the best university there is.
No
and
doubt.
I get paid to do that, and I actually get paid better than I got before with my fiat job. And that's kind of how I look at it. So I'm right now thinking, because I have Google Docs of like my learnings from the podcast. I have with my views on Bitcoin, where we're going, where we headed, what I'm thinking about Bitcoin. And I'm not a book writer. I'm really bad in writing. That's why I'm talking. But I'm thinking of working together with a ghostwriter to actually condense a book of all my learnings that is just complementary to the podcast, and make it like let's bring out like a book every 1.5 years that summarizes all the things you have learned on the podcast, for the people that maybe are not big on podcast, but they can read a book once a year, and they are like the best things in there. This book is nowhere near in the making. It might never come out, but
But you got the groundwork for it.
But I laid the groundwork for it, and I think it could be really good for people, and then maybe I have a better answer also for those questions, because I get that question also a lot, which tells me this might be something actually interesting. So yeah, as soon as I figured out podcasting better, and as soon as figured out all the processes, the infrastructure, maybe outsourced some post-production, because I still do everything you see myself. Once I figured all that out, I have more time to focus on a book, because I don't want to bring out a book for the book's sake, to be an author or something like that, to put some title on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I want to gather something that people are like, oh, like I learned a lot here. It's like if we go back to this university thing, of like usually in university you have like books and materials, and I would say then the book would be the material according to the podcast. So you attend the podcast university, and then the book is kind of complementary to that, where you can get everything you learn in like 300 hours down into, I don't know, 10 hours of reading a book. That would be the goal of that book. But it's hard, because it's a Bitcoin podcast, but I talked with Lisa 1.5 hours only about parenting. We mentioned Bitcoin 3 times. So should that be in the book? Is that then a Bitcoin book still? So there are a lot of hard questions to answer, and I probably have to work with a ghostwriter that is actually good in writing books. But yeah, maybe I also just write it myself. I'm really undecided on that.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and I think that even that's one of the best ways I've ever heard anybody talk about this kind of stuff is the university, especially in your unique position, getting to talk to so many interesting and knowledgeable, intelligent people. I would regret if I didn't ask this, but I saw Dale from QuickBit in Regina ask the question about a hardware wallet. What's your personal take on the best hardware wallet? That's a question I get here all the time on the show. But what's like the consensus from the people you talk to, and what's your personal recommendation in terms of a hardware device for people?
It's super interesting. It's like asking the smartphone industry, Apple or Samsung, like something like that. Obviously, it goes back to what is your self-custody solution, and that has to be something you really think about yourself. And there are many, even beyond, and I come back to your question later because I think it's important to talk about that first, the self-custody. Obviously, when you go ahead and think of like what self-custody solutions should I get, you have to consider so many questions, and you really have to think about it. That's Bitcoin. You really have to make the responsibility to yourself and not just outsource it. Not just just pay a small fee and outsource to some company that offers some nice thing. But there are so many solutions. There is, first of all, do I keep it on exchange? You shouldn't, but that's an option. There is, you can have it on a single hardware wallet, just like a Bitbox, a Treasure, a Ledger, whatever. Or do I have multi-sig? So do I combine multiple hardware wallets? Or some people just do it with their steel wallets and nothing else. Like you don't need the hardware wallet actually. Mm-hmm. If you're frank with that, but that's also very risky. Then there is collaborative multi-signature, where you have a fifth party, like you have 4 keys and someone is signing the 5th key, or you have 2 keys and someone is signing the 3rd key. I would never go with a solution where you have 1 key and someone else has 2 keys. That's too dangerous for me. Sorry, I just saw the chat and someone wrote Ghostwriter is ChatGPT. I love that. Might be. Sorry, back to the topic. So those are the options that you have. And so I would say, if you have a significant amount of money, or let's start there. If you have a very, very insignificant amount of money, let's say 200 euros in Bitcoin, don't bother with buying a $100 hardware wallet. Like, why are you doing that? Just either keep it on a hot wallet on the phone or keep it on exchange, whatever you prefer. But don't buy a hardware wallet for 50% of your stack. Yeah, exactly. If you have, let's say, over $1,000 in Bitcoin, there's the moment where I would say start thinking about self-custody, start thinking about a single signature. And then if you really go above $10,000, and definitely if you come to the $100,000 mark, so like 1 Bitcoin and above, you don't have, like, if you have 1 Bitcoin or more, and you don't have multi-signature, start thinking about it very hard if it's not an option for you. And yeah, if you have in the millions, then maybe multiple custodian solutions would be good, where you have a diversified portfolio of custody solutions. Maybe you have a multi-signature collaborative custody, you have a multi-signature yourself custody solution. There's a lot of advisors that you can buy in that help you along the ways. There's like literally a sea full of advisors. And yeah, so what's the best hardware wallet? I'm biased. I'm sponsored by Bitbox. So I don't feel like I can sit here and say, oh, I recommend Bitbox because I'm sponsored by them. But I only got into sponsoring because I used it myself. So that's my personal choice. But Treasure, for example, is a hardware wallet that has been battle tested the most. Has the longest history also. It's a great hardware wallet also. And there are many other ones. There's Coldcard. Then is the whole debate, do you want to have it air gapped or not? that's a deep rabbit hole, because some say, is there even something like air gapped, because you still have to exchange
still on the SD card. Yeah.
So that's still information from your computer to the hardware wallet. But obviously it's better than having the USB cable for a longer time in there. So there is so many questions and so many things in consideration of that. To answer your very simple question with a very long and complicated answer to that, go ahead and research and don't believe anyone. So there's so many people out there, and if you really research a lot, you have kind of this common sense of like, oh, this is something everyone says, or that is like that, and really just try it out. And what I also want to push everyone to do, if you have a custody solution and you decided on something, try out all the emergency things. Can you actually retrieve your hardware wallet with your backup? Can you do that? What if you have, for example, an advisor? What if your advisor is not available anymore? What if your phone is not available anymore? If your cloud accounts are not available anymore, your computer is all of a sudden broke. I don't know, everything at once fails all of a sudden. So how do you deal with those things, and can you actually retrieve your Bitcoin? So think about all the scenarios, and there is no solution that is 100% perfect. I worked before, now I'm fully in Bitcoin. I work only in Bitcoin, but before I actually worked in IT security. So I know firsthand, not one solution is perfectly safe. There will always be a small attack vector that
there's trade-offs, right, with everything.
Exactly. There's always a trade-off between because you can have like a multi-continental self-custody solution where there is in America a signing device, there is in Europe a signing device, there's in China a signing device, and you have like 7 continents, and you have like, I don't know, 5 out of 7 multi-sig custody solution. But how the hell are you signing transactions when you actually have to sign a transaction pretty fast? Do you have then friends there? Do you have to travel to all those countries? So there's a lot of questions involved with that. That's how there's not a if someone gives you a simple answer to that question, he might not tell the full story.
I think that's a perfect answer, and I try to kind of go through that in my own show every day when people are asking like Cold Card, Jade, Trezor. It's like everybody's different based on where they are, based on how much they have, based on their knowledge. There's so many factors involved there, and I think you hit it perfectly and said that you really have to look inside and figure that out yourself. And the web of trust, I think, has been a very big thing for me in Bitcoin, in terms of I'll watch somebody, and if I like the vibe, if I trust them, it'll lead me somewhere else. And that's kind of my web of trust. And if they're all talking about the same thing, the people that I trust, then it's probably something I should be either looking into, or, I can put a little bit of inherent trust, even though I'd like to verify myself. That's a good starting point for a lot of things. So that's a great answer, Robin. And I think that very useful for anybody out there who's going through this, because even if somebody's sitting on, you said $1,000 right now, but think about that 10x. Think about what that's going to be worth in 5 years. Or do you just want to have like a little device that you're plugging in your computer that you have I think of it like a suitcase full of cash, $100 million cash. Would you leave that laying around when you go to sleep, or would you invest a little bit of money and time to protect that? And, we're still at the very early stages where people just see this device and they don't really see what's behind that and that's holding, right?
And that's a great insight that I forget that I usually also tell in this thing. Treat your custody solution as if Bitcoin is 10x the value. So if you have, let's say, 0.7 Bitcoin, and let's say the value of that is, I don't know, $63,000, treat it as it would be $630,000, almost $1 million. How differently would you treat that Bitcoin right now? And I think probably half of the Bitcoiners would be like, maybe I would upgrade to some better system. Maybe I would rethink that security solution, because I think most of the Bitcoiners have a pretty weak setup. There are obviously the nerds. There are obviously people maybe that are publicly in Bitcoin that have like a higher incentive to really have a good setup. At least that was my motivation to really up my setup. I was like, I'm publicly available to know that I'm in Bitcoin. I should really have a good setup, not because of image or brand. I should have a good setup because what if something happens? What if someone stands in front of my door and is like, hey, Bitcoin, please. I know you live here. I know you have Bitcoin, so please give it to me. I don't want to give my Bitcoin away. I want to have solutions for that. I want to have practices for that. So really think about your Bitcoin as if it's 10x the value.
Yeah, and I think that just going back to having that target on your back and having that kind of surrounding you there, I think that the one thing I always say is protect it like a bank. Like the bank has security. They have cameras. They have Brinks trucks. They have people there. And I said, with a bank, they have insurance. They're holding somebody else's money, and they're holding a fake money. You don't have any insurance for yours. You're protecting it for yourself, and you're holding something that's real. So banks have their security. You have to think even beyond that, right? And so, I think that is something that everybody's going to be taking a little bit more seriously in the coming years. But anyways, Robin, we got like less than 5 minutes here. As you mentioned with Sailor, I had a whole page of things I wanted to talk about. We didn't get through 90% of them, but that's okay. We're going to have another chat tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, we will do the same thing. Also for people know, like now this is live. We will record a podcast with you tomorrow. So the podcast with you tomorrow will be live on my podcast in like 2 weeks time, something like that. So if people want to check it out, just come in 2 weeks time to my channel and see. There should probably be already something out there, and you will also probably posting in some of your channels. So like we will have more things to talk about. And I always have this, like I had this weird anxiety in me before I started the podcast that there's not a lot of things to talk about for 1 hour every day. Man, I was so wrong. I have now sometimes podcasts that go over 2 hours, and I'm like, I could go another 2 hours. So maybe I do at some point a Joe Rogan format, just go on for 5 hours, but it's a very long time. So definitely tomorrow we have another chat.
It's exciting. I think that's the main takeaway for me right now. I know the price is humming, everybody's excited, but it's what it is. There's so many great people here. And that was the thing that really led me to Bitcoin, is when I heard Bitcoiners talk, I could hear it in their voice. I could see it in their body language that they are here for the right reasons. And it's not portrayed that way necessarily in the media all the time, but that's absolutely true. So me and you are both very lucky to be doing what we're doing. I guess just to kind of wrap things up, first of all, any final words for people, any piece of advice, anything you want to leave us with, and also where can everybody find you? I'm sure most people are aware of, but just in case.
One thing I really want to say, because I think 2025 will be a crazy bull market. I mean, we are already in the crazy bull market, already started. And I think you can get distracted in a bull market. You can fall more easily for flashy and shiny things that are inside of Bitcoin and are portrayed as, oh yeah, it's Bitcoin, it's safe. Like, oh, look at that actually, like if you would actually do that. So just be aware of, there are way more scammers and way more things going on in a bull market than a bear market. Stay focused, stay humble, stack sats. That is such an important meme. And a lot of people get burned in the bull market because they fell for something. FTX, Celsius, we have so many stories and so many other scams, smaller scams. I also have that people want to come on my show, and then I visit their website and I'm like, oh yeah, it's basically a scam. They want to promote with Bitcoin their scam. So I also have to do a lot of due that's I think that's right now the biggest and the most important message, because the price can react some emotions in you, and then there's like an amazing offer and you're like, oh, I can get 5% more Bitcoin or something like that. Be aware that things happen. Also, like the topic of borrowing against your Bitcoin, it could be a good idea, but it's very, very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. And it's a better thing to start that in a bear market than a bull market. So there are a lot of things that we can go into, but I just leave it with like, stay focused, stay humble, keep stacking sats, don't fall for shiny things. Oh,
Yeah,
and sorry, you also asked where people can find me. I don't know, do they see my name here in the live stream? Basically just write my name everywhere. So Robin Sire, cut the space in between, and then you're good to go. I'm literally on every platform with the same handle, Robin Sire, on Twitter, Spotify, on X, on Telegram, on YouTube, everywhere with the same handle. You will find me.
And Robin, as mentioned at the start of the show, is on a mission to interview a Bitcoiner every day of the year. So if you ever run out of Bitcoin stuff to listen to, just head over to Robin's channel. He's had some phenomenal guests on there, from Sailor to Jeff Booth to science teachers and everywhere in between. So Robin, I just want to say thanks for everything that you've been doing in Bitcoin. It's incredible to watch, and the consistency and the hard work. And you say that you're getting paid to do it, and it's a treat, but you're also putting in a shitload of time and energy into it and helping Bitcoin in a big way. So I'm looking forward to our chat tomorrow. I want to say thank you for being here today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm going to keep the show going, everybody, and we'll say goodbye to Robin now. So thanks again, Robin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me on. Talk tomorrow. Bye bye.
Of course. Thanks, Robin. All right. Well, that was awesome. I love Robin. I've been watching his stuff for a long time. He's a very good interviewer. I'm hoping, I meant to ask him this was on the list today, but it was, my question was, are you going to be the next Peter McCormack? Because he's got the same Rolodex, and he's got the same interview style. He doesn't do any of his own shows, his own stunts. So I think that, he's done a very good job growing his channel in a downtime bear market, and it'll be exciting to see kind of where he goes with the bull run here. So, okay, well, that was I don't know what the hell we're gonna do now. We started 45 minutes early today. I didn't prepare much or anything for the show, so we'll just kind of talk things through. We'll talk about the price here a little bit. We'll talk about a few things, and then we're actually going to go over and talk about UTXOs for episode number 4 of the multi-generational wealth series that we're doing. So I'm looking forward to that. I was preparing for that last night. I was preparing for Robin's interview. Very, very humble, very knowledgeable guy. I'm very glad and honored to be able to. That was only the second interview we've ever had on the channel, and Serge was the first one. That was about 15 minutes long, so it was a little bit different than having a full show. So I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did anyways. I saw a couple things in the chat that we hit another all-time high. Is that true? Can we confirm that? Let's see here. I got 94,766. Did we actually hit 95, or was that a dream I had? I thought I was going to have to do the Thunderstruck mid chat with Robin there. Thankfully, we didn't. Okay. Well, let's check on the mempool. Let's go through the routine here a little bit. We'll do this for about, 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll jump over to some UTXO talk. Robin mentioned UTXOs a little bit in terms of his own Bitcoin journey and the importance. When I was writing the Bitcoin journal today, I was thinking about UTXOs. And, even if you don't join us today on the multi-generational wealth series, I really want you to start thinking about UTXOs. Start taking some time, learning what they are, learning how they're going to impact your current stack. taking a look at your own current holdings and seeing, what's making up this balance, because most people look at their Bitcoin wallet and they see the full balance there, but they don't see what's making up that balance. And it's much different than a bank account. When you see your bank account, it just says the balance, and that's it. That's all you need to know about it. But with Bitcoin, very similar to like holding cash, I think, because, if you have 100 UTXOs, think of that as like carrying around 1 million nickels in your pocket. It's the same thing. It's very inefficient. It's going to cost you a lot of money and time to move around, versus consolidating those, 1 million nickels into $100 bills. Very easy to move, cheaper in fees, everything easier to store. So keep that in mind with your UTXOs going forward. Even if you don't join the second part of the show today, make sure you're just thinking about it. And times like this, when fees are fairly low, that's when you should be focused on, because when fees run up, there's not a whole lot that you're going to be able to do in terms of UTXO management at that time. So let's check on the mempool. Let's check on what's going on here. I see MicroStrategy is humming as well again today. Shocker. Okay, so we're currently block height 871201. If you're transacting on the Bitcoin layer 1, if you're consolidating some UTXOs, you're going to be paying 13 sats per VByte. The last winner of the block was SEC pool, SEC pool, and we're still way ahead in the difficulty adjustment, 35 blocks ahead so far. So the hash rate is ripping, the price is ripping, MicroStrategy is ripping. What else could we ask for today? On the second part of the show, just to give you guys a little bit of a preview for it, it's going to be about 10-15 minutes long. That's what these episodes have been so far within the multi-generational wealth course. And I'm actually going to take a look at my UTXOs. I want to do this. I'd love to do this on the main YouTube channel, but I don't really want to dox myself. I have a wallet set up. We're going to look at the wallet. We're going to look at the differences between if I did this or if this happened. That would be the UTXO change. And having gone through it myself in terms of being in Bitcoin for 2 or 3 years before really knowing what UTXOs were and how it would affect my own Bitcoin setup, it cost me a lot. I mentioned yesterday it cost us 225,000 sats to consolidate. We thought we were doing things good. Every week we were buying Bitcoin, sending it to cold storage, just like we were told. And it ended up costing us 225,000 sats to do that. So that's what I want to try to save you from. And I mean, if it hurt then, it was like 200 or 150 or $200 worth then. But imagine in 10 years how much regret I'm going to have of wasting 225,000 sats to consolidate my UTXO setup. So that's what I want to save you from. And it might not be something that pays off in the next month or year even. But when you're sitting there 10 or 20 years from now, you have your UTXOs managed well, and you're not going to be wasting a whole bunch of sats on transaction fees. You're going to think back and say, oh, that $5 I spent back in 2024, probably worth it. So that's what we got today. Should we give away some Bitcoin? Should we look at Bitcoin well? Hopefully it works today. Yesterday it didn't, it crashed on us. We'll try it again. We'll try it again. So as Robin mentioned there, I'm going to be on his show. We're doing the interview tomorrow. It'll be released in a couple weeks. And then on Friday, I'm actually going on Fractal Bitcoin's channel. I don't know if you guys know Fractal Bitcoin. He's I love his channel. I've started showing up in the afternoon. He's been doing live shows in the afternoons for the price pumps. And he's hilarious. His laugh is infectious. He's a very entertaining guy. And so me and him are going to do a live show together on Friday afternoon. So you got that to look forward to. Mikkel's in the chat. We got to start with this one though. Sup, you sat, stack, and sleuts. I'm getting better at that. Happy new all-time high day yet again. And says, Jory, you look like a model. Let me take merch pics for you wearing king. All right. Must be the way I styled my hair today, just like every other day here. Throw a hat on. Are you a photographer or something, Mikkel? So the Bitcoin well here. Are we ready for this? Let's see if we got any unclaimed sats from our tosses yesterday. Imagine if it said 1 million. Oh, okay. So get your phones out. Get ready to go. Press send. Get your Lightning wallet opened up. Press send. And somebody here is going to win a bit of Bitcoin. Ready? Set. Go. Oh, it's working today. 2,100 sats. There we go. We had Robin. How did he say it? Sayer? It's not Sear. Sayer. Robin Sayer on the show today for a nice hour-long chat. Might have been more than that, actually. Hour 15. And somebody from the show is going to win 2,100 sats today, courtesy of the Bitcoin well. The best, without a doubt, undisputed best Bitcoin platform in Canada, in the US. You can do whatever the heck you need to do in Bitcoin on Bitcoin well. Buy, recurring buy, sell, swap. I did a swap last night. I'm going to talk about it on the UTXO show today. Very interesting. I couldn't believe how easy it was to use that swap feature. And trust me when I say, if you don't know what you're doing, swapping between Lightning and Layer 1, it can get very, very costly. When I first started doing it, I downloaded a Phoenix wallet, set up a channel. They charged me a miner fee. They charged me a transaction fee. I think I paid like 12,000 sats just to move some Lightning to on-chain. So you don't have to worry about any of that with Bitcoin well. You just send you open your Lightning wallet up, you press swap, you send it there, and you have your Bitcoin address loaded on the site, and it will send to your cold storage. It takes about 8 hours, usually 8 to 10 hours, because they batch it all together, right? So it's not something that just happens right away, but it's free. So if you're a Bitcoin well customer, you have the ability to swap Lightning and Layer 1 for free. So big shout out to Bitcoin well for that. Arnie snagged the sats. He's saving up for a new bone. Okay, what else we got here? Sorry, Zap stream. Sorry, everybody. I didn't want to, I didn't want to get distracted. I really wanted to give Robin my undivided attention for an hour. And so we didn't get to any questions and stuff like that. I think we had one from Dale. But other than that, we kind of neglected the chat. White says, I got a question about MSTU. It's a 2x long MSTR. Are there any downsides to buying MSTU over MSTR? Yeah, the downsides are just in direct proportion to the upside, right? So if MicroStrategy is up 5% today, that means that MST, this is like a very basic, a basic discussion on it. But if MicroStrategy was up 5% today, then MSTU would be up 10%. If MSTR was down 5% today, MSTU would be down 10%. So it's direct proportion. It's not exactly 2x, but it's pretty much 2x. If you look at the comparisons for, day to day, it's double or negative double. So the downside would be there's more at risk. There's more to gain, but there's more at risk. That's leverage in a nutshell itself. But I wouldn't say put a whole bunch of your portfolio into it. Maybe think of MSTU just like an altcoin in a sense, where you got 95% of your portfolio in like a MicroStrategy or Bitcoin ETF, and then you put 5% in like a more risky leverage play like MSTU. But the nice thing about that is it's a 2x long, so there's limited risk there. It's not like a short where it can really get out of control. There's a higher benefit with shorts if you're right, but if you're wrong, it can really, really really hurt you. So that's why I like the longs better myself. I'm not a huge stock market guy or a leverage guy, but I do like the MSDU. I think it's pretty interesting. Buck 52,000 says, my wife had the Bitcoin talk over dinner last night. She thinks it's too risky to go for more. Wow. You should say, that reminds me of that meme that says, the wife says, I saw Bitcoin was at 50K. Are you going to sell it? And the guy in the meme says, you sound like my ex-wife. And the wife says, oh, I didn't know you were married before. And the guy says, I wasn't. So tell your wife, Buck 52,000, that you sound like my ex-wife. Just make sure you're wearing a helmet. Oh man, that's good stuff. Oh my God, I just realized I forgot to feed the cat this morning. The outdoor cat has home. Maybe he's hunting for himself. He was in the garage last night. We got a crazy storm here yesterday. I'm surprised the power was on. I was kind of expecting it to be out for today. But anyway, so we got the mempool. We got the Bitcoin well. What else do we want to talk about? What else we got going on in the world today? Oh, there was a video I wanted. Let's watch this. This is hilarious. Let me bring this up here quickly. Let me make sure it's sent quickly. No, it didn't. Drafts. This was a high-end video. High-end video. I think the riskiest thing for people who think that Bitcoin's risky, I think the riskiest thing you can be doing in your life right now is owning 0 Bitcoin. But I mean, I get it. And that's kind of what Robin alluded to today too, is that I say it every day on this show, but it's like, we have to understand how early we are with everything. And that provides opportunity, but it also provides resistance from, people like our significant others, where they're not even on the same, wavelength as us in terms of Bitcoin, in terms of money, in terms of how we look at investments. So don't expect everybody or really anybody to understand. You just got to be patient and I hate to say it, but maybe you just stack some Bitcoin incognito if they're not willing to go along with it. Like, that'd be my best and worst advice, I guess. It's going to be interesting to see how Bitcoin, the role it plays in like legal proceedings and divorces and stuff like that. Like it's a much different asset than what we've historically had. Okay, let's watch this. This is great. I think we deserve, it's been four years of hell for Bitcoiners and for people like me. And so it's really good to see these people starting to lose their mind. Also, this guy right here might be one of my least favorite people on this planet. I don't usually like shitting people on the show. It's more to support and love. But this guy, one of the worst human beings on earth, in my opinion. So let's watch this. This is 2 minutes of Democrats eating each other, losing their minds.
Don't blame the voters. I think, look, we could get into this discussion, but one, I think you're blaming the voters. I think that's a terrible idea. And look, I debated Professor Lichtman before. I told him his theories about the keys were absurd. I was right. He was wrong. I said he'd lose his keys.
No, you were not right, and I was not wrong. And that's a cheap shot, and I won't stand for it.
Well, who won, brother?
You should not be taking cheap shots at me.
Who won?
You want to make your point,
live
make your
in
point.
a total
Don't make it
world
personal.
of denial.
I read your own followers' comments, and they all trashed you, every one of them, and supported me. So
Yeah,
quiet with your personal attacks.
Yeah, come find out again.
Make whatever point you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't make it personal.
You don't know anything. You don't know anything.
You attacked me personally.
You're so deluded.
Oh, right. I've only been a professor for 51 years.
On this program, I've never been able to finish a thought.
How many books have you published? No, because you're personally attacking me again. Say whatever you want, but I'm not going to
Okay,
stand
but
for
brother,
personal
you got it
attacks.
wrong.
Say
You were
whatever you want.
preposterously and stupidly wrong. So, okay, all right. Can I just
Don't
finish a
call me
goddamn thought
stupid.
ever on this show?
No, not if you're
Okay,
personally
well,
attacked. I
you proved
admitted
it.
I was wrong. I don't need you to call me stupid.
Okay.
Can I just say,
What
it's
kind of
great to see
nonsense
you
is that?
Democrats
Yeah, I
all
know.
getting
Who
along
taught
so
you
well.
manners?
It's lovely to
Unity
see
is
a
wonderful.
Can I
post-election
finish a
harmony as you all
goddamn
come
point?
together
We're
again.
just
Hey,
one
Alan,
right now.
shh. Hey, Alan, you deserve a tall glass of shut up juice. So can you just shut up for a second and let someone who knows what
Not
they're
if
doing
you're
so
gonna
right,
personally
Pierce.
attack
You're
me.
so right.
So-
We're so
Make any
unified right
point
now. It's
you
Okay.
great.
want. I
So,
will not sit here and stand
so
for personal attacks, for blasphemy against me. You don't need to do that. You don't boost your own
blasphemy
ego
against you?
by
What the hell are
attacking
you?
me
Are you
like that.
Jesus
Just
Christ,
make your
you
points.
loser? Okay, can I
Make your
can I
points.
just give the correct answer for once?
Phenomenal. Also, Arnie showed up to see that too. Arnie's here. Arnie has arrived. Phenomenal. I mean, did you hear that guy? And this is just like a perfect representation of where we are in the world right now. Did you hear that older guy with the tie that was getting shredded there? I've been a professor for 50 years. I've written 13 books. How many books have you written? It's like people like that guy have lived their whole life going along with the curriculum, with what they're paid to say, and as soon as they're challenged, they lose their minds. This is the first time that any people like this have ever been challenged, and they're starting to lose their minds over it. For the last 10 years, there's been zero debates on anything. As long as you're pushing their message, your voice is going to be amplified. No one's going to question you. You walk on water. Everything's good. But that's done. That's done. And I think they're starting to realize it. I think that most people in our circle and in the Bitcoin world are starting to realize that. And it's absolutely beautiful because it had to happen. We went way too far. The pendulum swung way too far left, way too far, almost to the point of no return. But you can tell now we're on the back slide here. They're eating each other. They're fighting with each other. They're arguing over nothing, yelling at each other. It's beautiful to watch because they deserve it. They deserve it. Those people have had it way too good, way too easy for not challenging anybody's beliefs, just going on with what they're paid to, with what they're supposed to say, and what's acceptable by society. So that is beautiful. Beautiful to watch and funny too. I don't know who that guy was. I saw Fractal Bitcoin was talking about that guy yesterday, Cenk or something. I've never seen any of those guys before other than the douchebag that's on Twitter, the Harry Davis or whatever his name is. But I've never seen anybody else. One more thing here, maybe a couple things I wanted to say today is holy. So let me bring this up here quickly. Somebody asked about the MSTU. So look at MicroStrategy today. It's at 477 US dollars. That's insane. I think when I got in a little bit, and this is going to probably dox myself a little bit, but I didn't buy many or buy much. I don't have a whole lot in the stock market. But when I bought MicroStrategy, it was 1,100 US dollars. And it did a 10x stock split. So that would be the equivalent of, this would be 4,700 US dollars if they didn't do the stock split there on MicroStrategy. So that's insane. And so the MS, you can see this going up just like crazy right now. Holy, it almost hit 500. But anyways, the MSTU here, if you look at this, like the MSTU would be 22% up today. It's 2x. So whatever it's doing, it's 2x. And if this was down 11% today, the MSTU would be down 22%. So it's a much more risky play. There's more to gain, but there's much more to lose as well. Wow. The other thing I wanted to say on that was yesterday I talked about the Michael Saylor interview that he did with PBD, Patrick Bet Davis. I don't know his name. PBD. His middle name's Bet, which is kind of cool. But we were talking about Michael Saylor, and somebody asked, or he said, "You have 5 kids," and Saylor said, "No, I don't have any kids." And it got super awkward. But I came to realize that somebody commented on the channel here. Where is this? Just give me one sec here. I'll find it. Here it is. This is from Because I Can. So this is important. I wanted to clear this up because I got this wrong yesterday. And I haven't verified this, which is probably bad, but I do trust this makes more sense than what I thought it was. So Because I Can said Saylor was talking fast and used the phrase, if I need to feed my 5 kids, just like as a metaphor or an analogy. Says, but he was just making an example regarding Bitcoin, and Patrick picked up on it. He does not actually have kids or a wife. Saylor has always said he does not have time for the distraction of a family. So sounds like a miscommunication. Sounds like I heard it wrong. And so I just wanted to clear that up because yesterday I was questioning Saylor, essentially calling him a liar or, going down that road. So I wanted to clear that up in terms of what actually happened there. What else was I going to say on that? We'll watch a video here. It's 5 minutes of Saylor. It's only audio. It was on the Twitter Spaces he did yesterday. But he's talking about why, because I watched the pyramid video yesterday, the pyramid scheme that Craig sent. Very interesting. Very well done. Very well laid out. Very easy to follow. So I suggest people check that out themselves if they're a MicroStrategy holder. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but there is something there for sure. And then I listened to the Twitter space, and they were talking about the premium on why MicroStrategy shares are selling at such a premium compared to Bitcoin. So in other words, if you had $100,000, or I guess $140,000 here in Canada, you could get one full Bitcoin. But if you're taking that $140,000 and you're buying MicroStrategy shares, you only get about 0.3 of a Bitcoin. So there's about a 3x, and it's probably more today now, 3x premium on top of Bitcoin that MicroStrategy is selling for right now. And personally, I think that the stock market, because they think much differently than Bitcoiners do, right? They think buy low, sell high. I think that the premium on MicroStrategy, aside from what Saylor is going to talk about here in this little clip, but I think people are paying for the premium, the expected price increase in 2024. They're trying to front run the Bitcoin bull run with MicroStrategy shares. Because if Bitcoin's value increased 10x, if it went from 90,000 to 900,000, the equity, the balance sheet of MicroStrategy would also go up 10x. So I think that that's what's being built into the premium right now, on top of what Saylor is about to talk about here. So we'll run this clip. We'll talk about some comments after, and then we're going to move to part 2 of the show. So here it is. This is 5 minutes long. I'll put it on 1.25x, and we'll listen to what Saylor has to say about the premium that people are paying for the MicroStrategy stock and shock. So this is just audio, no video, but it's Saylor on a Twitter space from yesterday. I think it was yesterday.
Michael, there's a perception that your stock trades at a premium to the intrinsic value of Bitcoin that you hold in the core business. Is that your view? And if so, what explains it? Is that the Saylor premium?
No, that's only a perception of people that haven't been paying attention or don't really do any research. If you actually logged into our earnings call, or if anybody studied the company, that's kind of like saying there's a perception that Microsoft trades at a premium to its underlying assets. Well, yeah, it does. It trades 50 times greater than its net tangible asset. So does Apple, so does Standard Oil, so does every operating company. So the myth, right, the misunderstanding here is people don't understand what our operating business is. Our operating business is a treasury operation that's securitizing Bitcoin. And the primary use that we offer to the marketplace is we offer high volatility, high leverage equity, like 2x Bitcoin in the equity or 1.5x Bitcoin. And that's very valuable. If you're an options trader or you're an investor, you would rather have 1.5x or 2x leverage on the equity. And the way that we create that in a systemic fashion is we strip the risk, the performance, and the volatility off of Bitcoin, and we sell fixed income instruments to the fixed income market that can't buy Bitcoin and doesn't want the equity and doesn't want the volatility. So when we sell a convertible bond, at a premium. We might sell $1 billion bond, and we would probably capture 750 million or more in the arbitrage on the day we do the deal. And then if we hold the bond 6 years and Bitcoin goes up 21% a year, we make $3 billion on the back end. So we generate $3.7 billion of shareholder gains by arbitraging the duration on cheap capital with the return on a crypto commodity. And the people that bought the bond can't buy Bitcoin. They're convertible arbitragers, or they're fixed income investors, or they're institutional investors, or they have capital tied up in a 401k retirement plan. So if you understand those things, you realize that, it's kind of like, and I use this analogy, Jan, it's like if you looked at Standard Oil and you said, well, the company seems to be trading at a premium to the oil reserves. Well, no joke. That's because the company has a refinery and it creates kerosene. You ever try to put crude oil in a rocket, or crude oil in a jet, or crude oil in your car, or pour crude oil on a highway? The point is, you can't. You need asphalt, you need gasoline, you need kerosene, you're refining it. You can't do the refining without the reserves. So the Bitcoin reserves that we have a practical use. The use is they're collateralizing the fixed income instruments, and then they're creating volatility and performance for the equity instrument, which feed the option instruments, which create the volatility. And all of those things together mean that we're just kind of like a transformer. You got 480 volt 3-phase power coming in one side of the property, and on the other side, you want to run your daughter's hair dryer, or your or your washer and dryer, or your electric heater, or and
I think
we're stepping it down.
Most 3-phase electricity will blow out the hair dryer, but I get your point. I think it's
I'm actually making the point that 3-phase power is what I use to run my 500-ton yacht, but there's a massive transformer that steps it down, from the street. And what MicroStrategy is doing with its capital is it's transforming high voltage Bitcoin into low voltage securities. And so that to focus upon the premium is completely missing what's really going on here. And I'll give you one more number, which I think is pretty important, which is, today, if you look at my tweet, I just noted we generated a yield of 41.8% this year, which is the equivalent of 79,130 BTC. That at 90,000 something a coin, that's $7.3 billion. And so if I didn't tell you what we did, and if I didn't tell you how much Bitcoin we have, and the only thing you knew about my company was we generated 7.3 billion in earnings delivered in Bitcoin, and we're growing more than 75% a year, how much do you think the company's worth?
Tremendous amount.
Yeah,
I think that's a great.
And then you would add in the Bitcoin position. So right, really, the people that are focused on the premium are ignoring the fact that that's a company generating billions and billions of dollars of shareholder value a year in hypergrowth mode.
Well, yeah, I mean, lots to cover there from that. It might be worth listening to that again. But I mean, I think that there's a couple things here that I kind of want to. We got to go. I realize I have a meeting at 10, and I want to do this UTXO thing right after this. So it's like the convenience. That's a big one. That's why there's a premium there, because a lot of people just who want to buy Bitcoin, want Bitcoin exposure, simply can't. So there's the convenience there. I think that there is the front running of Bitcoin price in terms of being able to capture it in a stock and in a volatile stock. It's good for traders. It's good for long-term holders. And so there's the premiums on it, plus the functionality of it and what they're doing, the vision for it. They're very transparent. They're very clear with what they're going to do. There's going to be no surprises. There's no external factors. I mean, other than a cyber attack that will take the network down for 2 weeks. But other than that, like there's no products or there's no services that could go out of style, right? So I think that most people are front running this. That's the reason for the premium. And I think that, as Wyatt said here, just going back to the leverage play, just put a small chunk of moose shekels into MSTU. I think MicroStrategy will get to $1 trillion market cap. I mean, it's probably worth doing. I wouldn't sell any Bitcoin for it, but I would say like get a couple of the MSTU longs. You're not going to, the worst case scenario goes to zero. Best case, MicroStrategy gets into the S&P 500. It's a top 100, top 10, top 1. And as I've said on the show before, if Bitcoin succeeds and MicroStrategy gets to number 1, it's never leaving that, because nobody else is going to be able to catch MicroStrategy. So it's probably a good idea to just like buy a couple of these MSTUs with zero expectations and basically just fall asleep for the next 10 years and just see what those turn into, especially if you can put those in a tax sheltered account today. That's a big move, in my opinion. Again, don't go crazy. Take like 2 to 5% of your portfolio, put it into that leverage play, and just sit on it. Don't try to get greedy. Don't think you're a trader. Just buy some today and let this thing play out. And if you're wrong, you lose a couple $100. If you're right, you're going to have godly amounts in your TFSA, in your tax-free account. Love the transformer analogy. Yeah, that I like that one too. Again, go back and listen to it. Just pay attention to what he's saying. Jason says, is that Ryman Auditorium shirt? Yep. Did I get it there? Nope. Did I get it at Valley Village? Yep. My go-to spot. Okay, well, I got to wrap things up. Again, we're going to go over to the second part of the show here. We're going to talk about UTXOs. Not the most important part. I think it's more important to keep your Bitcoin, but I would say UTXOs are right up there with self-custody, with key management. And you want to know this. You're not going to learn everything about what it is today in 10 minutes, but it's going to give you a good idea, a good understanding of what UTXOs are, what they mean today, and what they're going to mean in the future. And I actually have a real life example that we're going to look at in terms of managing your UTXOs. So best way to join that, you can either go to, what am I set up on here? Is this, I didn't even do this properly today. What's the play? Yeah, we can't do this. I didn't set it up properly. We're gonna have to do it tomorrow. Shit. It's too bad. Anyways, it probably worked out for the best because I would have had to rush through it today. So it's 9:38. I got a meeting at 10. I got to eat still a little bit. Okay, we can hang out for another 5 minutes. We'll turn this into a 2-hour show. Was there anything else that I wanted to cover today? I don't know. Craig just shared something on Zap stream. Let's see what he's got going on. Oh my God. That's definitely got to show up for this. We got to bring this one up. Another all-time high. Oh my gosh. That's phenomenal. Good stuff there from Craig over in the Zap stream. Okay, how's the Zap stream working out right now? Let me just double check. Coinos. Just for anybody out there who's considering joining, let me just check this. Oh, I thought we were on this. Good. 8:52. Yeah, we got a couple zaps today. We got a couple zaps. We got 1,000 sat zap. I wish I could see who they were from though. It says good interview, Jor, and there's no thing attached to it. We got 420 sats, 121 sats, and Has anyone been zapping Arnie's wallet today? Not yet. Oh, we just got 94 sad zap from the Zap stream. But if you're watching on YouTube, you can. I'm starting to use this phone as like our YouTube Zap stream. So if you want to send a zap in, if you're watching on YouTube, you can send it to that, or with our new banner that we just created, if you don't have access to your camera while you're watching the show, you can send it to adoptedson98@walletofsatoshi, and it'll pop right up here. It'll be a big green flash, and that's the YouTube. We got our own YouTube Zap stream now. Hey, look at this. Duchess, super chat. Thank you. Thanks, Jor. Another great show. See you in part 2. Well, unfortunately, there's no part 2 today. We're going to have to save that for tomorrow, but that's okay. It's Thursday. That's okay for part 2. And I'll have everything ready to go. It was a bit of a scramble today. Again, 45 minutes early start. Had to prepare for the interview itself. So things were a little bit choppy. But we got it done. It was a really good interview. Elliot says, will I ever sell a single Satoshi? Of course. Of course I will. I think that, there's a big difference between selling Bitcoin for just keeping fiat. Like, I'll never do that. I'm never going to be like, oh, okay, well, I doubled my Bitcoin earnings this quarter, so I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to take out my money to play with house money. I'm going to keep the rest in fiat. Never. Never, ever, ever. And I think for 95% of my stack, it'll never move. I'll never even get to use it. Maybe. I might go to the bank and say, that at this time, I think banks will be much more friendly to Bitcoin. They'll actually want Bitcoin. That's my theory, is that if you have Bitcoin, that's going to be like their number one collateral. That's what they're going to want. Because it's very easy. They, instead of having to go out, and I've compared this before quite a bit. But if you think about like the current day collateralization of assets, where a farmer, if you think about a farmer, you've got a whole bunch of farmland, glorious acres and acres of farmland. If he wants to buy a new truck, he doesn't sell a piece of his farmland, a small, like a couple acres of it. He doesn't sell the land. He goes to the bank and say, I'm going to put up my land for collateral. I need some money. There you go. But think about that. Pretty easy to do as a farmer. That's why they never sell their land. They just lend against it. But from the bank's perspective, it's a little bit more, there's more moving parts there, because you have to consider that the value of it is always going to be changing. It's going to go up. Hopefully, most farmland does. But if you think about or a rental house or farmland or an lakefront property, like the value is always changing, and the market for that asset is very limited. So maybe, the town that they lived in was it was booming. It was an oil town. They had some farmland out there, but then all of a sudden everything went away. And so the value of that has changed. The market for that has decreased. There's less people wanting to buy that land now. And the banks have to manually adjust that and adjust their risk factor there. And if you compare that to Bitcoin, it's not the case at all, right? Two things there is that it's a global market. They know that if they had to sell that Bitcoin, if you stop making your loan payments, they could sell that Bitcoin that day. And there's a worldwide market for that. And they know the value of it. They can check the website, see what the price, see what the value is that day. That's why I think the banks are going to be wanting Bitcoin as collateral. They're going to want to hold Bitcoin on their reserves. That's going to be their number one asset on their reserves. And the last part there is that they're not going to have to verify anything. They don't have to check land titles. They don't have to check with the lawyer. They don't have to check sales documents, anything like that. They can look at whatever you're putting up as Bitcoin for collateral. They can look at your wallet, see what the balance is in there at that moment, and see what that's worth. It just makes way too much sense for something like that not to play out. So I don't think that I'll ever sell Bitcoin for fiat. Nobody would do that. You don't trade something that's real for something that's fake. But will I sell some Bitcoin to, buy a new truck or buy a new set of golf clubs? Yes, but I'm not trading it for cash. I'm not trading it for fiat. That doesn't make any sense. And I might not even sell it. I might just go to the bank and say, hey, I need a line of credit for $5,000. I need some spending money. I want some new irons. And, you know, I talked about this in another clip, I think on YouTube, and somebody was like, well, won't you have to pay back your loan? Well, yeah, of course. Right? Of course you will. But this is how you should be thinking about it. And maybe this is where we'll end today. But the example that I love when you're thinking about selling Bitcoin, when you're thinking about what you're going to do with your Bitcoin in the future, is think about this scenario. And I think it was Peter McCormack that introduced me to this logic. He said his son was wanting to buy a vehicle. He saved up like 10 grand. He wanted to put a down payment on a new car, a new vehicle. And Peter said, why don't you just, like, based on where we are right now in the cycle, why don't you just buy Bitcoin instead? So he did. He bought $10,000 worth of Bitcoin instead of buying a car. He just, you know, waited it out, walked, took the bus. And so he bought $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. And of course, it went up, as Bitcoin does. If you hold on to it for 4 years, you're going to be in a better spot than you were. So he had more, let's say he had 50,000. The Bitcoin went from $10,000 to $50,000. But instead of selling that Bitcoin and buying a car, he just held on to the Bitcoin. And so he took out a loan. Obviously, if you're keeping your Bitcoin, you're going to need a loan from the bank. But instead of selling the Bitcoin and you know, having no debt, getting the asset, he just would use, if he needed to, he would sell some Bitcoin and make his car payments. So of course you have to pay back the loan, but you're holding it in an asset that's appreciating, right? And if you compare like an interest loan or an interest rate of 6, 7, 8% on a car versus the average return on Bitcoin every year, which is like 40, 50, 60%, you can see the spread there and why it makes sense to hold Bitcoin instead of selling it and getting rid of your debt. So very practical, I think, real life scenario that a lot of us are going to run into in the future. But it's things you got to be thinking about. Buck52 says, if everyone holds their Bitcoin forever, doesn't that kill the network? No. Think about it like land. If everyone held on to their land forever, would that kill the value of the land? No. It's as Sailor's been talking about, it's a capital reserve. You can use it for peer-to-peer. It's usable. It's a currency. I can send Bitcoin to you anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection. And if you do it properly, nobody knows that we're doing that. But it's the main use case for the banks, for the countries, for big corporations is going to be a reserve like land. So you're still going to have stable coins. You're still going to have other altcoins, other currencies that you're using. But as long as you have Bitcoin as like the base layer there, as the denominator that's accurate, that's measurable, that's verifiable, that is the supply is known today and in 10 years from now, then everything will be revalued and repriced off of that. So I think that's it. Man, we've been having some long shows here lately. Some might say too long. Not me. Oh, somebody sent in a zap. We got from Lucky and Duchess 500 sats to Arnie's wallet. Thank you. So Duchess is throwing all the weight around. She's carrying everybody today, or he's carrying everybody. One of the two. Super chat and the zaps. So with that, I saw Stephen was in here too. Stephen, hi, Jor. Great show again. I'm going to send some sats for the introductory song. Would you say hello to my 9-year-old daughter, Kitty? I love Stephen. Stephen's out in Ireland. I haven't met too many people from Ireland that I don't love. And there's a couple people in the Living in the Future community from Ireland. I cannot wait to get back there. And of course, Stephen, would I say hello to your 9-year-old daughter, Kitty? Yes. Hi, Kitty. I would like to introduce you to our best friend, our best guy, Arnie. So I hope everybody in Ireland, Stephen and family's having a great day there. And thanks for all the support. through the last couple months and year, Stephen. It's very much appreciated. So have yourselves an amazing hump day today. Oh, look at that. We got Stephen Curran, who I thought was the legendary basketball star, Steph Curry. Stephen Curran from Ireland as well. Another Stephen from Ireland. The best people, in my opinion, come from Ireland. And the best golf courses too. The weather though, not so much. Not so much. So everybody, I hope you have a great hump day. Those who liked the show today, those who sent in a zap, are, as always, guaranteed to get a hump in today for hump day. So great show today. Thanks again to Robin. I don't know if he's going to watch this or not, but great chat. We're going to have more interviews. I'm going to try to do one per week with a different Bitcoiner. So if you have any ideas for people you want to see on the show, just leave it in the comments here after I close the live chat out, and we'll get in touch with them. And we'll keep going here. We'll keep riding the wave that is Bitcoin. What a beautiful time in history. Just be thankful that you're here right now. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you once again. And we'll see you right back here first thing tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.